have an angel. We do have an angel in our midst, and her name is Jeanie Langford. And Jeanie, as you all know, pitches in whenever needed. And she, for our lecture series, she kicks it off every year, and then she closes it every year. And it is always willing to fill in when needed. So when I got the call from our speaker last night, I immediately emailed Jeanie, and the first thing I saw this morning was, I'll do it. So thank God for Jeanie Langford. Jeanie is going to talk about her genealogy work, and the title is The Genealogy Detective, as you can all see. And I don't think I need to give you an overview of Jeanie and her history. We all know how wonderful she is and how highly educated she is as well. So Jeanie, thank you. Jeanie Langford.
Well, this is a great surprise. We will not be having beefsteak today, but we will be learning a little bit about some of the things that I do, and some of the things that you can do to trace your family and their roots. First thing is go with what you know. Your date of birth, your place of birth, your parents' dates of birth, place of birth. Don't let the opportunity slip by to speak with relatives, aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins. And one of the most important things, keep multiple copies of your work. I like paper because I can always put my hands on a piece of paper. You can store it on flash drives or store it in your computers, but if something goes wrong with that, you may lose everything. But paper is always going to be there. This is took well in 1915, right before the fire. Learn about the city, town, or county that your relatives lived in. Sometimes that's going to give you great clues as to what they did, who they were, how they lived, and in some cases, where they lived. There are great sources out there. Oral histories, family Bibles, obituaries, old newspapers, census records. The Library of Virginia has scanned the chancery records, and a lot of those are really good help. The Virginia Historical Society has a lot of good things. Old documents, court records, city directories. Those big old fat pulp directories are invaluable. They'll give you names, addresses, where people worked, whether they owned their home, rented their home. Sometimes they even give you the children. They give you the businesses and where they were located. And always you can come and visit me. It's always good to start at your local library, which in our case is the Appomattox Regional Library System. We have a great local history and genealogical room, and I can help you with your projects. This is something that I do that a lot of places don't. I try to make myself available as possible. And today, if you want one of my cards, you can give me a call or email me. And the best part is, I don't charge a dime for doing the research. Sometimes it takes years, but that's one thing we try not to do at the library. The old saying is, a picture is worth 1,000 words. This is a picture of the colored branch of the YMCA in 1916. It was located near Davisville. Unfortunately, it has no names. I'm sure that some of these families stayed here, and I hope maybe someday, as we keep digitizing, that somebody will recognize someone and we can put some names with these faces. The immigrants. Hopewell in 1915, 16, 17 was full of immigrants. DuPont had a school to teach these people English, and we had people who came from Greece, Russia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Armenians, Syrians. They came here to work. They were also fleeing from some of the oppression and war in Europe and looking for a better life. Many of these people would stay here, and most all of them became naturalized American citizens, and they were very, very proud of that. These are the Hopewell All-Stars. They were a semi-pro baseball team in the Negro Leagues, and they were the best semi-pro team in Virginia. This picture is worth 1,000 words because Mr. Otis Henry Jr. took the time several years ago to identify them, and you may see some familiar names. The Hill family, Reverend Curtis Harris, the Whitfields, the McGills, all of these families, the Goldsons, Raymond Macklin, Herbert Wheat, Elijah Jameson. These families stayed here and have been here for a very long time. Genealogy. It's not a perfect science. What appears to be just might not be. You have to think like a detective and put the clues together. Sometimes you're going to find things about a relative that are disturbing, but you have to remember that they're a human being just like you and I. I have to tell a story. Did any of y'all know Larry Merriman? Well, Larry Merriman has been coming, he passed away recently, but had been coming into the library almost as long as I had been there, searching his family. And a lot of times people would just go, Jeanie, it's Larry. And I'm like, I got this. Well, Larry's great-grandmother had 2 children, and they were taken away from her. And she disappeared. And he had searched forever to find out what happened to her. It took me 17 years to find out what happened to Rosa Stark. And when I did, I called Larry, and I said, Larry, I want you to take all your medication, a couple of tranquilizers, and come on down here. So what had happened is Rosa had disappeared. She, about 8 years after the birth of the first 2 children, she became pregnant again. She was living in Mount Pleasant, North Carolina, in a little bitty, tottering cabin. It was in February. She delivered the first baby and killed it. She went outside in the freezing cold to bury the child, and she didn't know it, but she started to deliver the second baby. She killed that baby and was trying to bury them, but she bled to death and basically froze to death. It took until we got newspapers.com and I kept trying to spell her name all kinds of ways. But it made headlines all over North Carolina. So sometimes you're gonna find things that are a little disturbing. When you go to visit a place, like the Library of Virginia, or some historical society, don't go rolling in there with that little cart that's got 50 million things in it, because they're gonna look at you and go, But you wanna try to work on one person at a time. It avoids confusion. Keep copies of all your work and use the resources available to you. Additional tips. When you hit that brick wall, which invariably is going to happen, put it down and walk away. Because the more you mess with it, the more it's going to aggravate you. Remember, 2 and 2 in genealogy doesn't necessarily equal 4. It could equal 5. It could equal 3. If you do walk away from it, put it where you know where it is, because someday you may want to come back. If you visit big research shows, be prepared. They're not going to necessarily do the work for you. They might hand you a box and say, dig through it, you're on your own. I do things a little bit differently, but when you go in there, just keep an open mind, because that is their policies. Beware. Not everything you find online, or even in the census records, is correct. Case in point, in my opinion, my great-grandparents had 2 daughters. Then they had a 3rd child, and they figured that was a daughter. Well, they figured they were going to not have a boy, so they named my aunt after her father. Her name was Fred White, not Frederica, Fred. So in the censuses, and even in her school records, you will see my Aunt Fred listed as a boy. She definitely wasn't, but it happened. The census takers were not always well educated. They spelled what they heard. So sometimes you might find a name and you know that's what it is, but it's spelled differently. And like I said, occasionally the person's sex is wrong. So you have to study and work hard. You have to dance a little, like the 2B's Pony Girls. Otherwise, you get a little crazy. Sing a little. And enjoy the journey. Because each one of us is unique. Our families are unique. Learning about who and where we come from helps us have a sense of place and belonging. Knowing your family history can also be beneficial to your health in case there are some diseases or conditions that can be genetically inherited. That's my information, but I do have to tell y'all one last story, and this is one of my favorites. Several years ago, I was contacted by a man named Costas Afantakis. Mr. Afantakis lived in Canada. Well, his grandfather, Stratos Zarades, had come here to work for DuPont. He left his family in Greece, all his daughters and his wife, and he never went back. And he stayed right here. He died. I found his obituary and found out where he was. He was in Appomattox Cemetery. With the help of the people in charge of the cemetery records, I was able to find his grave. It was unmarked, but it was amongst some of the other Greek families like the Moramises. So I contacted Mr. Alphantakis and said, I found him. So he and his friend came all the way down here from Canada. I took him around on the streets of Hopewell, and he was dancing up and down the streets like the Sword of the Greek, because he felt that he was walking on places where the grandfather that he never knew had walked. And also he was keeping the promise that he had made to his mother and grandmother that someday he would find him. So after that, we went to the cemetery. And it was a very moving experience. He had, on this unmarked grave, pictures. He placed pictures of the family, and he knelt down, and I backed up along with his friend to give him some space. And he looked at me with tears coming down his face, and he said, he knows that someone has come for him, and it's all because of you. The next day, we went to the Greek church, and the father at the Greek church did a special prayer for Strawberries. He returned to Canada, and he ordered a beautiful headstone for Strawberries. So I promised him that when it arrived, I would go and take pictures of it. And he was so happy. He'd never gotten to come back down to see it in person. But what it also led to was, because of him and that search, I had to write an article in the Virginia Genealogical Society's newsletter, and they were very moved by it. So that's what you can do with it. You can make people feel better. You can bring closure. Sometimes you don't find the person, but in some cases, I can put them on the ground where that person lived, and they can walk where that ancestor walked. And so that's why I love genealogy so much. And I am now open for questions. If any of you would like my card, if you're stuck somewhere, I'd be happy to help you out. And as always, it has been my pleasure to be here with you all. And thank you.